The rogue class has always been one of my favorite features of the Calamity mod, as I really enjoy being able to use completely modded weapons and accessories, fully immersing me into the Calamity experience. Before this run, I even considered it my favorite class, so in this video I wanted to put that to the test by beating death mode for the first time as a rogue. After chopping some trees, I began exploring the world to start getting early game gear, such as the nasty Chola weapon from Cacti. I quickly reached the underground jungle and died even quicker. I continued to explore underground and was able to find a life crystal. I wasn't having great luck finding boots or a bottle, but I did craft the gleaming dagger to help me pillage the pockets of cavern enemies.
You will get
64 copper coins.
Type yes to affirm.
While exploring, I made sure to bomb all demonite veins I found, as with the evil bars you can make the coin of deceit a great early game rogue accessory. I also destroyed a shadow orb so the goblins could invade later. Since the last time I played, they reworked the Wolfram knife into an infinite use weapon with a burst of 3 projectiles, which made it surprisingly strong on normal enemies. Now that I had enough demonite, I compressed my tricks into a doubloon. After dying in the ocean, I found out one of the mods I have installed lets you teleport back to your death point with an item, which saved me a lot of time throughout the run. I reached the sulfurous sea, which confirmed I had only one desert, so I began to dig, hoping to find the underground desert, as no entrance had spawned in my world. I needed to kill storm lions, as their mandibles are used for the first rogue armor set, enabling my stealth strikes, and they're also used to craft the desert scourge summon. I made the iron axe weapon for its piercing, and after a little more farming in the desert, the prowler armor was mine. After the greatest king slime fight of all time, I went back to the mines in search of basic mobility accessories. Finally, I found a blizzard, immediately followed by flurry boots. I was hoping for fledgling wings as well, so I guzzled a grav potion, but I only found a balloon. Once the potion ran out, I crafted up the desert medallion and slime crown. However, the desert scourge fight was going far from ideal. With the goblins arriving, I could make my go-to weapon the sticky spiked ball. Or not, because the devs removed it from the game. After another death to scourge, I decided to farm for the contaminated bile weapon from the acid ocean, and started work on my elevator to find the goblin tinkerer. With my workshop in hand, I could now combine my accessories, allowing me to finally defeat Scourge. Desert Scourge is usually a very easy boss, so I was quite surprised with how much trouble he gave me in this run. The main issue was my lack of vertical mobility, as I would frequently get hit anytime he charged up or get stuck between the boss and projectiles with nowhere to go. Early game rogue is also fairly underpowered, as it took ages to get off one stealth strike. I mostly use the Iron Francisca that has high piercing damage which sliced through the Scourge's slithering segments, but occasionally I would throw out a bile blast if I couldn't hit down the length of his body. Eventually though, after a lengthy fight, he went down. Now that I had defeated Scourge, I crafted a set of Victide armor and the fishbone boomerang, then refought him for the Scourge of the Desert. King Slime was pretty easy, and I just ran back and forth for a simple fight. I also replaced my Band of Regen with a much stronger crown jewel. I also fought the clam mini-boss in the Sunken Sea so I could buy weapons from a Midas to aid in my next crusade against Cthulhu's Eye. Before fighting him though, I got an Anklet of the Wind to make my lightning boots and crafted the Spore Knife. I also found a Cloud in a Bottle to help with my vertical mobility. Beating the Eye of Cthulhu took forever, as I struggled to outpace the boss. The first phase wasn't too bad, although the added projectiles shot in the direction Eye is facing made it a little tricky to just run in a straight line as you normally would. The Sand Dollar Stealth Strikes did decent damage while he moves slow enough to get consistently hit. At the start of the second phase, I spammed some attacks to clear all the mini eyes, then went back to chucking my dollars made of sand. At this point, the Eye of Cthulhu started dashing much faster and more frequently, causing me to start getting hit and miss attacks. In death mode, he does these weird staggered diagonal-esque dashes, which were really tricky for me to dodge, as you need to be running while at the same time precisely dodging away from his attack angle. Eventually though, with a rage boost, I took him down. I just want to say, if you're enjoying the video, please like and subscribe, as this took me over 100 hours to make, so I'd really appreciate it, and only 0.2% of my viewers are. Now that I was defeated, I could do the Acid Rain event to make sulfurous armor, which in addition to increasing my damage would give me yet another double jump. The next boss on my cutting board was Crabulon, who as per usual didn't pose much of a threat. He's a pretty passive boss apart from the end of the fight when he starts spamming an ungodly amount of homing projectiles, but I was able to lock in and win without issue. Crabulon dropped the Fungal Clump, which is a useful regen accessory with some bonus damage, but I wanted the rogue weapon, so I re-fought him. Both the Boomerang and Mayakot were both pretty bad. The Eater of Worlds is split up into 4 segments in death mode from the get-go, which makes the fight a decent amount more challenging and decreases the effectiveness of piercing weapons. But with my ample-sized arena and hot swapping to my mushroom weapon for a healing buff, I was able to dash and jump away from its rushes, easily clearing the first half of the Eater's health bar. Eventually though, the segments began to balkanize and I started to take more damage. But with some dashing, I was able to maneuver through their caucuses and win this fight on half health. Now that I had access to shadow scales, I made the silencing sheath to boost stealth generation and took the highway to hell for new ores and some ultimately useless weapons. I gathered the remains of a meteorite and crafted the meteor fist, which is a kinda weird weapon. It lackadaisically follows the cursor, getting more uncontrollable the longer it takes to hit an enemy. But its stealth strike damage was by far my strongest option. The Hive Mind is a boss I'm not great at, as I pretty much always end up playing Crimson, so I've only beat it once or twice. But luckily none of the death mode changes seemed that bad, and the meteor called down by the fist did a good job at killing the minions the Hive Mind spams, allowing me to take down the first phase without issue. Once the Hive Mind started doing its weird circle dashes, I started getting hit a lot more, as they were really messing me up. By the time it started spawning shade rain clouds everywhere, I was starting to get pretty overwhelmed, but I focused on taking out the hearts that spawned the clouds and killing other enemies, which let me take less damage and slowly chip away at Hive Mind's health, defeating yet another death mode boss. The filthy glove from the treasure bag is a useful stealth accessory, so I equipped it, then made my way to the clouds to mine Aerolite. For some reason, Calamity makes you get feathers to craft the Aerolite armor, so I farmed more than a few harpies. With my new armor and feather knives in hand, I started the Drayden lab quest to make my next weapon, the PLSR tracker. And with my new upgrades, I was ready to do a little beekeeping, and the tracker proved very powerful with good homing and damage, as well as decent crowd control from the piercing lasers. The queen bee fight was overall pretty challenging, as she attacks and moves much faster in death mode, and her massive stinger barrage is fairly hard to dodge. But with some good dodging, I was able to win. Skeletron the Scary Skeleton is the next boss in the way of my stealthy rogue. The PLSR tracker did a good job at taking out his hands, which meant I could get through the first phase pretty easily. But I struggled a lot with dodging his sped up charges and the projectile walls he spawns when teleporting around. Once he started spawning homing skulls, I started to get hit more often, but with buffs and previous practice, I was able to kill him. I quickly grabbed the shadow key from the dungeon, then began delving into the depths of the abyss to get the lionfish weapon, which I plan to use against Slime God. I also went ahead and made the bundle of balloons to improve my vertical mobility, and crafted the Mirage Mirror, which gives much more stealth generation than the silencing sheet. The last boss remaining before Wall of Flesh was Slime God, who ended up being very easy. The lionfish has a really strong stealth strike that spawns homing projectiles while it's being thrown, then sticks into enemies dealing lingering damage, which let me take down the slimes very quickly. The fight got a decent amount harder once I started splitting up the big slimes and they spawned minions, but at this point I was still on full health, so it was fine if I took a few hits. I just repeated the process for the corruption slime and won on my first try, making it the easiest boss in the whole playthrough. Adrenaline boost in hand, I upgraded to Static Gel armor and made the gel dart weapon. I died pretty quickly on my initial attempts of the wall, but he also took a lot of damage from my stealth strikes, so either way it wouldn't be a long fight. During the start of the fight, the Hungry tended to lag behind the wall, so I was able to use my higher direct damage weapon, the Lionfish, and hit the eyes. Once he started spawning the weird purple orb projectiles, the fight got a lot harder as I'm not really sure how you're supposed to dodge them. As his eyes popped out to enclose me, I switched to the gel dart for better range and homing, then popped a giant adrenaline into rage, taking out the remaining 8k of the wall's health bar, bringing my world into hard mode. Now that the Astral Infection spawned, I gathered the materials to make Titan Heart Armor, which is the best available for Rogue until 2 mechs have been defeated. I also harvested the Cursed Dagger dropped from a Clinger in the Corruption. I farmed Dark and Light Shards for the Equanimity, but lucky for me, my world spawned a non-existent hollow stuck inside the underground jungle. So I waited for my own mini one to form, and in the meantime crafted the Amalgamated Brain for some survivability. Eventually, I was finally able to get some Souls of Light and craft a Cryo Key and the Equanimity. Usually I fight Prime first, but that didn't go well, and neither did the twins, so I crafted up Angel Wings, I started grinding attempts on Cryogen at day, and Destroyer by night. Eventually I was able to get a winning fight against the Destroyer. Despite usually being easy, the Silver Serpents buffed in death mode to move much faster and have more aggressive head charging patterns, so I lost many runs to being one-tapped at almost full health. The Equanimity was far and away my best weapon as it got 4 to 6k damage per stealth strike and could easily melt an entire blob of rogues. And with that, the fight was just up to me dodging the head, which I was able to manage in the winning attempt, although I almost died to the laser spam. I mined the newly generated Orichalcum ore, then made the spiked gemstone. I also used the tier 2 bars to upgrade to the electrician's glove. Combining Essence of Havoc with the glaive from the bandit, I crafted the blazing star. With a mithril pickaxe, I could mine Swavite, which I used to craft the ruined medallion, reducing my stealth strike use to only 75% of the bar. Aquatic Scourge surprised me as the Orichalcum Spike Gemstone didn't seem to do that much, and despite my weapon upgrades, the Equanimity continued to be the strongest choice. The fight itself though wasn't very difficult as even in death mode he's pretty slow and passive, so I was able to get a few adrenalines and only started taking damage as his stinky clouds of gas built up across the ocean towards the end of the fight. But I still easily won with half of my health remaining. Before fighting the next mech, I wanted to beat Cryogen as he provides access to numerous rogue weapons. The fight isn't super hard, but it was incredibly grueling. My weapons all did pitiful stealth strike damage, but at least the Blazing Star was good for breaking his shield. Because of this lack of damage, it took over 5 minutes to beat him. The start of the fight was easy, as Cryogen has a pretty simple dodge pattern, but I got hit a few times once he started teleporting and dashing more aggressively. I was able to recover my tempo though, and went back to almost full health before he started the insane homing projectile mind spam and brought me down to 20 health. Since my frigid foe was also about to die though, I was able to win. With Cryogen defeated, I bought the Ice Star from the Frozen Merchant, which has a decent fast homing attack and slightly better stealth strike damage than my other weapons. And after painstakingly killing Cryogen 4 more times to get each weapon drop, I made the Kelvin Catalyst to use against the next mech. I tried using it on the twins, which was ineffective, and once again instantly died trying to fight Prime, so I was pretty happy knowing that I spent a few hours beating and farming Cryogen for no reason. Since Prime kept killing me so fast, I decided to fight the twins next. After many close calls, I eventually was able to beat them. The Equanimity was once again my strongest option, as it bounces back and forth between enemies on stealth strike, meaning if I lined it up right, I could get powerful chain attacks on the twins, shredding their health bar. The fight consisted of me lining up 1 or 2 stealth strikes while they were bunched up, then running around to not get caught in their chain attacks. Eventually, I landed a powerful rage adrenaline boosted combo Once Retinazer started to get low, I focused on him so I could just fight Spasmatism. By the time it was just me and Spaz, I was pretty low, but with the fight reduced to a 1v1, I was able to regen my health up and defeat the conjoined twins. Once again, I mined the next tier of ores, making the adamantite throwing axe, and used the new adamantite pickaxe to mine cryo ore in the ice biome, allowing me to craft the Daedalus armor set and the crystal piercer. I also gained access to the desecrated and consecrated flasks, though still none of these upgrades were any good, with the equanimity being my best damage option for the start of the fight, and every other weapon matching in mediocreness for hitting Prime's skull. With how slim my chances were looking to beat Prime, I actually decided to skip ahead and fight Calamities for new weapons and accessories. I did pretty well on the first attempt and snagged the Crush Claw Crusher, which I used to beat her. The start of the Calamities clone fight was pretty easy, as she doesn't attack super fast. I made it out of the first bullet hell phase damageless thanks to a dodge. And made it to the brothers phase without any danger. And just like the boss they're not so subtly based on, they got melted by the equanimity. Afterwards, when the Calamities clone spawns in the mini seekers around her and dashes towards you, was definitely the hardest part of the fight, and led to most of my deaths. But by focusing on moving vertically and falling back down with the slime mount, I was able to mostly avoid her dashes. Now that Calamities was defeated, I could gather solar veils from the eclipse, which I used to craft the vampiric talisman and totality breakers. While I began to get further into the Prime fight, I still consistently died shortly after he began, shooting skulls and laser bursts from his head. I spent so long losing to Prime, I even tried fighting Plantera, Leviathan, and Astrum Aria, but ultimately decided trudging along with Prime was my best bet, and I even equipped some more survivability accessories to last longer during the fight. To start the battle, I would use either the Equanimity or Totality Breakers to destroy Prime's arms. My main strategy for the start of the fight was just to hope I could kill all the limbs before I got hit too many times, as with the sheer amount of projectiles and the speed that Prime moves, it's very challenging to reliably dodge everything. Once he's down to just the skull, you'll begin to spawn lots of homing ghost skulls, but I had a hard time dodging, as they home so aggressively that you can't circle around him. Instead, you have to go diagonally forwards before falling and dashing back to where you started, which really broke up the momentum of the fight. Additionally, while dashing at you, Prime moves much faster and spawns bursts of 12 evenly spaced lasers from his head, making it very hard to run away or even have the boss on screen without getting hit. Eventually, Prime started spamming homing rockets, which were decently hard to dodge and did high damage. But I was able to dial in on this attempt and narrowly secure victory over by far the hardest boss thus far by killing him and then instantly dying to a lingering projectile. Now with all mechs defeated, I had access to hallowed bars and crafted the Umbraphile Regalia. And I also bought the Deep Wounder. I went ahead and bought enough potions for infinite buffs, since it felt like at this point I was just wasting opportunities for bonus damage and survivability during boss fights.
He was running for my popcorn.
With all those upgrades, Plantera still proved to be fairly challenging, but she was nowhere near as bad as Prime. The start of the fight was very simple, with me just circling around her, using the Deep Wounder for single target damage. Once Plantera started farting everywhere and making me touch her spiky balls, dodging got a lot more complicated, but it still wasn't too bad. During the phase shift, I switched to the Totality Breakers to clear away all the tendril spawns, then continued intermittently switching between it and the Deep Wounder for the rest of the fight. I nearly died around the 40k health mark when Plantera decides to start running after you while emitting stinky gas clouds and spikes everywhere, but with some careful flight and positioning, I was able to hang on and take her down. I made the Samosara Slicer and bought the Glove of Precision before farming dungeon enemies to get ectoplasm. I made the Phantasmal Ruin, then took on Leviathan and Anita, which was an easy fight. The Phantasmal Ruin and Samosara Slicer did comparable damage, but the lingering effect of the Slicer was very effective on Leviathan's large, slow-moving body. And its homing was good for Anita. And after crafting the Asgard's Valor, I went back to the Abyss to get Depth Cells and Lumino, now that Leviathan was killed. With those in hand, I made the Abyssal Mirror, a massively useful accessory that adds a dodge onto the stealth generation boost from the Mirage Mirror. The next boss to face my rogue was Astrum Arias, who has a pretty simple dodging pattern and a relatively easy fight. The Samosara Slicer kept up decent damage, and apart from getting hit by his stomp in the middle of the fight, which I never fully recovered from, he wasn't an issue. Adrenaline boost in hand. To the Jungle Temple's defender, Golem. Golem is already harder for me than most people, but I find him especially difficult in Calamity. The changes with his head shooting lingering explosions and laser barrages really make the fight too difficult in my opinion, when he is already boosted to have crazy defense. But by focusing on dodging, and by the end of the fight more accurately just frantically flying around trying not to die, I was able to win after a few attempts. I farmed for the Stellar Knife and used my new Pixel to mine Scoria ore for my final armor upgrade before Moonlord. I got the canisters to craft Legnades and the Epidemic Shredder, but neither weapon was any good. I was pretty excited to fight Plaguebringer, as I think he's one of the coolest and most fun bosses in Calamity. Plus, the first time I played Rogue was back when the Malachite was much stronger and had only a 1% drop chance, so I have a lot of experience fighting him. Luckily, the practice carried over to Death Mode, so he wasn't too challenging, although at this point in the run, I was really lacking DPS capability, as I was still stuck using the Samosara Slicer to fight him, which drug out the fight against the radioactive mech unnecessarily. Another issue is when Plaguebringer Goliath spawns the homing bombs and minions, I struggled to destroy them quickly, as I would be waiting on stealth strikes to attack the boss, instead of having a constant stream of damage like other classes. Once he starts dashing diagonally more frequently and spawning in the missile walls, the fight gets a lot more hectic, but I was able to focus and recover, leading to a win. I realized at this point that I completely missed the Leviathan Teeth weapon, which seemed good for Ravager. I also summoned the Martians for a different weapon, the Doomsday Device. Ravager is one of my least favorite bosses, and I find Ravager to be needlessly tanky with way too high of a damage output. I do like the tweak they've made to the fight with how the walls work, is they no longer do contact damage if you fly into them horizontally, which makes the fight way more fair. Of my new weapons, the star of the show was the Doomsday device, which generally outclassed the Leviathan teeth. It needs to be charged a certain amount until it flashes rainbow above the player's head, then you have to throw it or else it'll begin to fade in damage. When thrown at the proper charge, it does upwards of 9k in one single hit, and the ricochet made it really good at Ravager, as it would hit all different parts of the body, sometimes hitting damage ticks of 30k DPS. My main strategy was just to stay as far away as I could from Ravager without drifting into the fire pillars or getting hit by the rock walls moving to the edge of the screen. Once he entered the last phase and started spamming pillars, it got significantly harder to dodge, and I switched to the Leviathan teeth to avoid my attacks getting blocked. I refought Ravager to get the Corpus Averter, a decent weapon with good straight line pierce and lifesteal. After remembering to upgrade my health to 650, I grinded out attempts on the Pork of the Sea, Duke Fishron, who Calamity makes incredibly difficult by extending his final phase to be roughly a third of the fight. The first phase is pretty easy and relatively unchanged from vanilla. In addition to its damage, the Doomsday device was good at clearing through the sharks and bubbles, keeping the screen clear. Duke moves faster in the second phase and spawns much more Sharknadoes, which makes the fight harder, but I still got through it without much hassle. The last phase, however, I had no clue what to do for, and basically just panic dashed and flew around as fast as possible. With the Stellar Knife's homing, I could focus on dodging, and I emerged on top. I didn't get Fishron Wings or the Duke's Decapitator, and not wanting to deal with him again, I bought a few treasure bags to get them. I was ready to start the pillars, so I took on Lunatic Cultist, who is kinda crazy in death mode, but I found with weird, mostly stationary positioning near him, and short diagonal dodges, the hordes of projectiles that he spawned would slip past me. The Duke's Decapitator is really good for targets that stay in one place, so I was able to make quick work of his health bar. Using the meld blobs from pillar enemies, I was able to make the Dark Matter Sheath and the Shard of Untumbra weapon. With my new pillar gear in hand, I took on Empress, who is always a challenging fight, and her increased attack speed, combined with stronger homing, caused my health to sink pretty quickly into the fight. Another problem was that yet again my damage was pretty bad, with me only getting at most 2.5k on a stealth strike. But despite the long fight, I was able to lock in and get Rage Adrenaline to take her down.
He was running from a
The last boss standing between me and Moonlord is Astrum Deus, yet another Calamity Worm boss. Deus isn't too bad, with the start of the fight being very easy as you fight one worm who spawns hardly any projectiles, but upon the half health mark, he'll split into two, which makes avoiding contact damage and lining up shots a decent amount harder. My weapons were all relatively comparable, with the Duke Decapitator being particularly good at damaging Deus when he's traveling vertically, and the Corpus Averter being good horizontally, although it had the added bonus of lifesteal. The fight started to ramp up once the worms began shooting spiral lasers and spawning more splitting projectile orbs, but using the Corpus Averter, I was able to just barely leech life and keep myself alive, finishing the worms off. I got the Regulus Riot, which is a decent homing weapon, but the Shard of Untumbra was the overall best for Moonlord. Moonlord himself was brutal, killing me over and over. Eventually, I stopped to make the Radiant Star, but it was comparably mid to the Riot.
No, 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 no. Wait.
Moonlord is always a really annoying boss fight. He's unfair to the player, does way too high damage for the amount of health he has, including invincibility phases, and is just overall not fun. I used the shard for primary damage to his eyes, and used the Regulus Riot or Radiant Star to kill the leechers while waiting for his top eye to open. Luckily for me, Calamity adds on to this by scaling up his health and damage, as well as making the death rate a permanent facet of this wretched fight. So unleashing the core didn't make things any easier. I stuck with my homing weapon so I could stay a little further away and dodge the projectiles easier. After a grueling 4.5 minute fight, I was able to finally win, entering the home stretch of the run. I mined a Luminite Meteor, then crafted Lunar Kunai and Moonwalkers. I bought the Celestial Reaper as well as crafting the Profane Partisan and the Empyrean Armor set. Lastly, I got the materials to make a Blunder Booster. With all my new gear in hand, I took on Dragon Folly for the final rage upgrade. The fight itself wasn't too bad as you just fly back and forth while he dashes past you, but my damage wasn't quite good enough to kill the mini Dragon Follies he spawns quickly, which made me get hit a few times, but I was still able to pretty easily win. The Profane Guardians aren't much of a challenge, basically just serving as a warm-up to Providence, but the fight gets harder as each Guardian is defeated. The Lunar Kunai weren't dealing the best damage, so I'd gotten pretty low by the time the commander came out. However, with some tight dodging, I was able to win. Surprisingly, Providence was pretty easy as I got over halfway during my first attempt. My main strategy for dodging her projectile wave attack was to get as far away as possible, then slowly work my way back towards her so I can slip through the last 3 phases of her attack quickly. As the fight continues, Providence doesn't really gain any new attacks or increase in difficulty, so I just continued to chip away at her, aided by an occasional rage or adrenaline boost, until she finally went down after a nearly 6-minute fight. I mined up Eulaboom ore to craft Tarragon armor, then made a normality relocator as I had forgotten to do so. Cygnus is easy enough to dodge, but thanks to his insane contact damage, you can only afford to be hit 1 or 2 times during a fight. But with a few attempts and plenty of patience, I was able to defeat him and get the Cosmic Kunai. The Kunai did well on Stormweaver and brought me back up to passable damage, which led to an easy win, as until the last phase where he rains down projectiles, Stormweaver is barely even a boss. I decided to skip Ceaseless Void for now and move on to the much easier Poltergeist, everyone's favorite Plantera clone. The Cosmic Kunai dealt solid damage and I was able to win without much issue by just zigzagging around the arena to avoid his weird dashes. After wasting my life away farming bloodstone, I crafted the cores, then made a set of bloodstone armor. And then forgot to record myself exploring the abyss to get new weapons, but it's fine because they were all still worse than the cosmic kunai.
He was whipping up shit in a kettle, boiling shit.
Actual shit, like
boiling poo in a kettle.
With my new armor though, I was able to defeat Ceaseless Void, who is such a poorly designed boss. The strange spinning attack patterns of the orbs as they go towards and away from Ceaseless is so unintuitive, and I mostly just hoped when it came to dodging the boss's attacks. The only useful thing was to try standing still when possible to boost my self generation. Eventually though, after quite a lot of frustrating attempts, I won. And was able to craft the Void Striders. The next boss for me to face was Old Duke, who I've never actually fought before. In case you couldn't tell, he's Calamities' version of Duke Fishron. Much like with normal Fishron, I just ran away, attacking him as he chased behind me. Old Duke will get out of breath and stop, at which point his damage reduction will drop, so I tried to make sure I could hit him with stealth strikes whenever that happened. The fight went pretty smoothly until the end, when all the projectiles and nuclear nados began to build up, and I started choking. But I just barely won by the skin of my teeth. I got the Toxicant Twister, but it wasn't very good, so I bought another treasure bag to get the Old Reaper. I was ready to fight the Devourer of Gods, who initially confused me with his Nordic knot tying, but through many attempts, I learned his attack patterns and got the hang of the reworked fight. The first phase of the Devourer is pretty easy, as he has a much smaller size and his laser walls are far simpler. In basically every attempt, I would clear it with an adrenaline ready for phase 2. Shortly after he reappeared from the cosmic portal, I unleashed Rage Adrenaline onto the Devourer of Gods and dealt a sizable chunk of his health bar. A key technique I learned through my various attempts is to not over-dodge, as he will often decide to circle you, or you can just ram dash through his head at the last second. Doing this prevented me from making unnecessary mistakes and made it easy to normality relocate away once he was completely wrapped around me. The laser walls in the second phase include a purple beam that does a lot of damage and will randomly cut through the safe spaces, which meant I had to pay a lot more attention to dodge them. The Devourer fight trudged on much the same until his next set of laser walls, which have way more close-knit and sporadic beams, making it far harder to hover in a safe space. But at this point, I had enough practice to make it through with precise and quick movement. After he reaches about 40k health, Devourer will start rapidly dashing out of his portals trying to hit you with his head. This was easily the toughest part of the fight for me, as getting hit just twice would mean instant death. By moving diagonally up and then dashing back towards him when he appeared, I was able to dodge the dash phase with a hefty amount of practice, and make it into the final part of this grueling 4.5 minute fight. The rest of the fight is basically just a nerves check as he repeats the previous laser wall and rapid dashing pattern, but luckily I was on full health, so I made it through and proved myself the Devourer of Gods. I crafted the Executioner's Blade, then farmed the upgraded Solar Eclipse, Frost Moon, and Pumpkin Moon to combine into Spirit Essence. I crafted the Eclipse Mirror, Nanotech, and equipped the Affliction. I made Godslayer armor and upgraded to the Asgardian Aegis. I refought Devour for the Dimension Tearing Disc, then crafted more weapons as I was struggling on Yaron. On the winning attempt, I did a lot of arbitrary switching between them, hoping to increase my damage, as Yarn himself is pretty easy to dodge, and I would consistently do well during attempts, but kept dying due to poor DPS. Using the Dimension Drive dash from my armor and Normality Relocation to dodge his flame circles and get out of bad positions was a crucial strategy to winning. I mostly used the Hypothermia for its balance of offense and range, as in previous attempts I used the Dimension Tearing Disc, which requires Yaron to be on your screen to hit, making the fight much more risky. With a few adrenalines mixed in, I was able to win, finishing off the fight with my trusty homing kunai after a brief 5.5 minutes. I got the final Dawn from Yaron and mined the newly generated Auric Tesla ore to make my final armor set, crafted the Seraph Tracers, Seraphim, and refought Yaron for the Wrath Wing. With my final upgrades out of the way, I began the hardest part of this and really any Terraria run I've ever done. The, dare I say, religious experience of beating the Exo Mechs. For starters, they're the penultimate boss of Calamity, so they do high damage, have complex hard to dodge attacks, and a lot of health. But that isn't the full picture. Rogue, I truly believe at this point, is the worst class by far, as it took minutes to clear each phase, and getting to the final phase would take 6 to 9 minutes based on how many adrenalines I was able to get in a given attempt. To start the fight, I would always summon Ares, as he's widely agreed upon to be the hardest, so I wanted to clear him first and fight the weakest standalone version of him. The final Dawn has a unique cell strike when holding up that allows the player to dash diagonally and receive some iframes, which I use to dash through his arms and dodge attacks. This made the first phase against him pretty simple, albeit long. Usually I would get a Rage Adrenaline ready for the next phase, where I unleashed it against Artemis and Apollo while using the Wrath Wing. During this portion of the fight, my DPS was significantly worse, and I spent ages going back and forth across my arena whittling down the Exo Twins' health. I basically just ignored Thanatos and stayed vigilant of the green homing missiles, positioning myself to avoid stray hits. Eventually, I made it through to where all 3 mechs appear at once, and went back to the final Dawn to attack Ares and get carried by its iframes. Luckily in this run, I entered flow state and got Ares low enough to 1v1 without taking many hits or needing to heal. At first, when Ares reappears, he continues the same attacks, but pretty quickly he will unleash a laser light show that speeds up and becomes nearly impossible to dodge. I mostly tried to get through it by positioning myself as far away from him as possible, working my way inwards as the spin sped up, as well as using the Normality Relocator and Dimensional Drive to skip through the lasers. I kinda fumbled on this attempt and almost died, but I was able to finish Ares off, which brought in Thanatos, who was basically just free time to heal and build adrenaline. Once I got Artemis and Apollo low enough to enter their second phase, the fight really kicked off. The orange one will get a death beam that spins around super far, and I could pretty much only dodge through teleports or more dimensional driving. Additionally, I try to keep moving in the direction of the orange one, as it makes the green missiles and dashes completely miss. Thanatos tripped me out during my first few times getting to him, but he's deceptively simple. All I did was just frantically run in circles around him to dodge the mini red lasers. Then when he winds up the head beam, you just need to stay still and it will miss you. Then you can dash away once it's done to mitigate contact damage. The Rampart of the Deities definitely carried through this phase, as I was using pure iframes half the time. I got pretty low and my nerves were catching up to me, but I managed to persevere and win after a brutal 7.5 minute fight. The Refraction Rotor would be good for Calamitas, and I equipped the Exo Throne for her bullet hell phases. Supreme Calamitas usually isn't that hard for me, but I struggled a lot with the Brothers phase, as in death mode they attack much faster and one will respawn, making it last even longer. Eventually I opted for no mobility accessories, and used Drayden's Heart for survivability, and sat in my Exo chair the whole fight. Which honestly wasn't that big of a hindrance on my movement, as you want to be moving precisely anyway. The Celestis was good for clearing the heart, and other than that I just stuck with the Refraction Rotor. The fight went along pretty well. Although I got hit quite a bit in the bullet hell phase right before Cataclysm and Catastrophe, so I entered the hardest phase already down to 300 health. Luckily I locked in super hard while riding my mechanical throne and went from one tap back to almost full, making it out of the phase alive. Once Calamitas spawned in the portal and the circle of enemies around her, I quickly dropped in health once more as the arena thinned and I struggled to slip through the projectiles. But right as my health hit the danger zone, I popped the nano machines from Adrenaline and got off of potion cooldown, healing me up to full. At which point I made it through the final bullet hell and just barely managed to take down the heart once more, finally beating Supreme Calamitas. Doing a death mode run for the first time was a lot harder than I expected, but I think it was thanks in large part to how bad Rogue is, or at least was for me using stealth strikes. Thank you guys so much for watching. This was easily the longest amount of time I've spent recording or making a video, so please like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Unless it gets a lot of views, I probably won't make any more Terraria videos like this just because of how long they take.